Okay, so without further ado, let's see, I got this one here. I'll just keep that one up for now. All right, so a little bit about me. My name is Trent Duncan. Some of you guys know me, some of you might not, but I am a U.S. Navy military veteran. I did 5 years in the Navy, 3 deployments overseas in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. It was a great time. I loved it, 2004 to 2009. Okay, I did a lot of fun stuff, went a lot of places, learned a lot. But eventually I felt like it was time for me to move on. And that's when I left and went to California. I lived over there for about 1.5 years, working in the entertainment industry, you know, because I was young, thinking, hey, I want to be a movie director. But eventually after that, I came back home to Florida. So I had a good experience in California. The weather was beautiful, met a lot of cool people, and learned a lot of good stuff, actually working on some sets out there with a lot of other creative individuals. And then when I came back home, I started my own little production company, kind of like many of you and folks that graduate. I just went out and started doing stuff, promotional videos, shot my own little short films, just kind of did a lot of stuff for free, okay, just so I can get a lot of practice, put stuff on my resume, on my reel, because you never know which one's going to catch on, what person that you work with is going to hire you for something else or refer you to something else. So I did a lot of stuff for free, a lot of promotional videos for free, a lot of running and gunning. It got me a ton of work and experience under my belt, shooting, editing, and just getting out there and doing lots of different stuff on the fly, which was good. And so you kind of need that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people don't take the time to, hey, I need to do a lot of stuff for free and work with a lot of people and get a lot of contacts. Even if they don't go anywhere, you're still using your skills and you're still learning stuff for yourself. All right. I also started a film festival called the End of Days Film Festival. That's going to be in our 5th year coming up. It's an apocalyptic film festival. And that's fun because it gives me an idea of what other short films are out there and what other people are putting and submitting into festivals. I get films that are really, really bad, but I get films that are really, really good too. And so I've got a lot of insight on films that people put in the festivals and then how much money is behind those films and how that has an impact on the production quality and the production value of films too. Because at the end of the day, sure, you can make your own movie, but sometimes having some money definitely helps out. And you can see it in some of the quality of these films that are putting out there. So that gave me a good insight on just looking at a lot of different films and a lot of variety of movies that folks are doing in the independent industry. And of course, my YouTube channel, I started that a while ago and it became fairly popular. I do epic horror battles, which is what everybody comes to see. All your favorite old school horror characters, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, battle it out in epic horror fashion to the death sometimes. We started our first one in 2011 with Jason versus Leatherface. My buddy Cheyenne, he actually did a fan film with somebody else, and the person didn't finish it. It didn't really go over well. But I said, dude, we can do that. And so I picked Leatherface as another character because he had the costumes and I had the camera. And so I said, let's go do it. And so we did that, and we got about 1 million views, you know, in less than a year. And we went to some horror conventions and we shot a couple more. And so eventually those started just gaining traction because people online are already looking for stuff about characters they know. So the marketability was there. People knew who Jason Voorhees was, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and all those. And so they would search that and they would come across my videos. And I initially thought like, wow, this is a great way for people to see my other stuff. But people didn't care about my other stuff. They just wanted more of those epic horror films. So, hey, if you're good at one thing, sometimes you get stuck in a market, whatever, as long as you're doing something that you enjoy, filmmaking, and you can make an impact on some folks, then hey, why not? So right now I got almost 200,000 subscribers, which is great. I make a little money off of there, not a whole lot to retire on, but a little bit. And it just helps me pay for the production of the upcoming film, because as you guys know, sometimes these things aren't cheap at all. So it's a fun little outlet, and I can be creative with it in regards to a lot of cinematic stuff that we're going to talk about today, and have some fun with it too, and know there's a good audience out there for it. All right. So a little bit of what we're going to get into today. Oh, I can do that. Boom, boom. Me and my thumbs up. What is cinematic lighting? So we just talk about what it is real quick. We're going to go over 3-point lighting as a refresher. Okay. I don't want to hit on it too hard because there's 100 videos out there about 3-point lighting, and you can just go ahead and check any of those out, and they're all good information. Everybody's putting it out. So that's something you can find. But I just want to kind of go over it real quick so we can kind of move from there. We're talking about the properties of light. Okay. and then the motivational light, and then we're going to get into the elements of cinematic lighting and how that kind of is different than just your regular 3-point lighting and where you're kind of moving from. All right. So cinematic lighting. I got these cool pictures I pulled offline. Some of them are good quality, some of them are not, so you have to bear with me here. A lighting technique that goes beyond the standard of 3-point lighting, so it's beyond your basic 3-point lighting setup, and it helps to add drama, depth, and atmosphere to your story. And we're going to talk about some of those different elements and how it adds those to your story and to your scene. Okay, so it's just beyond 3-point lighting. It's out of the box kind of lighting to add those elements to your scene. It helps to build on the emotion and mood of your scene. Okay, so there's many ways you can light a film with cinematic lighting, and there's many ways that'll all be right. So you can do it 10 different ways. 9 of those ways will probably be right. 1 of those ways will be questionable, but still won't be wrong. Okay, so when it comes to lighting, lighting is all about the mood. It's about the feel of it. Okay, so how you want to interpret your scene and what you want to get across to your audience. But of course, there's always basics that you have to start from in order to build from that. And that's your 3-point lighting right there. Look at that handsome guy, huh? So just a real quick, 3-point lighting consists of a key light, which is your brightest light on set. It's the brightest light. Your fill light, which is opposite your key light, 45 degrees off center. Okay, and then your backlight or your rim light or your hairline light or your kicker, whatever you want to call it. There's plenty of names for it. And those are your 3-point lighting, the 3-point lighting setup, like a generic 3-point lighting setup. This is great for interview stuff. This is great for something to shoot for if you're just going over the shoulder, you know, and you have coverage that you're doing. And you want to kind of emulate something like this in order to create the lighting effect on the individuals that people are used to seeing. That's very beautiful. So as you see my picture over here to the left, 3-point lighting. I think you guys can see my mouse. So the key light is on this side over here. It bleeds off. The fill light is over here on this side of my face, which would be my right side of my face. It's not as bright as the key. Okay, the key is the brightest part, but it fills in some of those darker shadows. And of course, if I had more hair, you'd probably see a better rim light, but that is the rim light back there, and it has a little bit on my shoulder as well too. Okay, and that's over my right shoulder back here. Me personally, I always like to put my key or my kicker, my rim light, opposite my key light, which is on the side of my fill there. So it helps accent some of that dark side. So once you kind of learn that and get the feel for a 3-point lighting setup, then you can even manipulate 3-point lighting setup and maybe take your fill out. You see that a lot on ESPN documentaries. If you watch some ESPN documentaries, they have this dark spot like right here, and they have no fill at all. They have a hard rim light in the back. They have a nice key light, and then their side of the face is really dark and dramatic. And I'm like, why do they need to be so dramatic? We're talking about sports, man. But that's what they do. So they decided to kind of do that. That's their thing, but hey. So there's a lot of ways you can manipulate 3-point lighting to create a dramatic effect. And this is good for, you know, interview stuff, but also for just when you have individuals talking to camera, like I said, coverage over the shoulder shots that you're going for. It's a good starting point, okay? So moving from there, ooh, look at that. So we're going to go into the properties of light. So how you control or manipulate light. Okay, so every time you set up a light, you got these things you got to talk about and determine and figure out what you're going to do with the light. Okay, the direction. What's the angle of the light that it's coming from? Okay, how's it impacting the scene? Which is really your motivation, which we're going to kind of get into more right after this. So where is the light coming from? That's what you got to figure out first. What's the intensity? You know, how bright or how dim is the light going to be? And that goes along with your mood too. You know, if you got a comedy, your lights are going to be a little bit brighter. Okay, so you're not trying to hide anything. If you have a suspense thriller or maybe even drama or a horror film, your lights might be a little darker. Okay, it's not to say they have to be that every single way, but they might be a little darker because you're trying to hide stuff. You're trying to create a dramatic mood for that scene. Okay, the color. What colors enhance your mood? You know, blues and oranges are big. Okay, those are big, but there's certainly a lot more colors than that. Blue gives you a warm, happy feel. Okay, I'm sorry. Orange gives you a warm, happy feel. Blue gives you like a cooler. It could be a little bit more of a sadder feel. But that all depends. Okay, you can still change and manipulate that. But there's certain ways or certain areas to start from. Then of course the quality, how hard or soft your light is. You'll see softer lights in like your dramatic films, your dramas where they're very beautiful. You want the characters to appear very pretty, very beautiful. Okay, but that's not to say you still can't do that in, you know, a horror film. All right. Then the harder lights, you know, you see a lot of those in your suspense thrillers, your gangster films and stuff, just because they're edgier. So the light that's edgy goes along with the feel of the scene or the characters or the mood that's going on. A very edgy mood puts you on the edge of your seat. And so that's why sometimes hard lights are in those. Okay, so people can get a feeling just from the lights that are in the scene, and that's how you every time you turn on a light, man, you got to figure out which all these properties that go along with that light and how it's going to impact your scene. All right, properties of light. So let's take a look at this one here. This is from a film I did, Galactic Lineage, starring Mr. T.L. Westgate, and this is our gal Cara Mullins. She was an alien in this. So just real quick, I picked this one because it's colorful. I enjoyed this scene in this film, and I had a good time shooting this. And it was easy. Boom, wide shot. She came over. We just knocked it out real quick, and that was it. So let's just look at the red light. Okay, so we're looking at the red light, and we're going to talk about direction, intensity, color, and quality. All right, so just to give you a little bit of a backstory, she came from a spaceship, guys. That's why there's a red light out there. Okay, that's not her taillights of her car or semi-truck that she backed into the driveway. She came from a spaceship. So I have this gigantic red light. So what's the direction? Okay, it's coming from a higher point. Okay, because you can kind of see it peeking around the window there. I had a hard time trying to maneuver and hide it, but hey, whatever. Can't be too perfect, right? And so it's from a spaceship, which is a bigger spaceship. So it's coming from a higher point, and it's shooting directly into the door. So I have a light on there with some red gels. It's a 1K, 1,000 watt light. And I shot it directly into the door because I wanted to emulate kind of like a headlight or a front light on a spaceship. Okay. So what's the intensity? It's very bright. Okay, as you can see, there's some bright spots. All right, by the door. I can do it up here. Look at that. There's some bright spots by the door, which get close to being a little overexposed. Okay, and you can see it out there. So it's really bright out there, and then it kind of falls off as it pulls into the scene a little bit too. All right, and then the color obviously is red. That's a no-brainer there. And then of course the quality, it's hard because you can see it creates a hard shadow in here, creates a hard shadow on the door. Okay, so hey, I'm emulating a spaceship. Boom, that's my one light. It hits her in the back. It's also acting as kind of a key light for the scene, but in the same sense, it's a backlight or a rim light for her. Okay, so this is where you move from your traditional three-point lighting setup to the motivation of the scene is the light in the scene is a spaceship. Okay. Now, yes, it's a key light, but it's also acting as her backlight or her rim light for this. And it's lighting up this part of the scene over here, this part of the set. And as she comes in, she walks over here. But so that's one light. Let's check out the blue light on the other side. So the blue light here is kind of like him simulating moonlight. And this is if I wanted to get super like film theory-ish. Oh, Mr. Trent, when he shot this, he wanted to showcase the parallels between the spaceship world and the real world, and that's why he did these contrasting colors. You know, I'm taking film theory classes right now, and people are saying this kind of stuff. You know, their classmates. I'm like, you don't know that. It was like a happy accident. Like I certainly wasn't thinking that when I lit this scene, but now that I'm looking at it, I can be like, wow, yeah, the contrast between the real world and the alien world. Sure, why not? So sometimes stuff just happens in movies. Okay. Sometimes you just do it because it looks good and it makes sense. And then there's other stuff that you can pull out of it. But for here, I had a 1K that was shooting in on the outside to simulate the moonlight. But I also had a small little LED light up top here shooting down. Okay. Shooting down on this table. All right. And so that's simulating the moonlight that's coming in from the windows outside. And so now you have this blue light. Okay. Direction coming up from the windows kind of high. The intensity, it's not too hard. Okay. Or it's not too bright, just soft enough to emulate and lighten up this area right here. The color is obviously a bit more blue and the quality is soft. Okay, so I have these two lights that are kind of playing back and forth in order to light these parts of the scene. And obviously there's dark areas of the scene to help add some contrast, which is also a key element for cinematic lighting, which we'll get into a little later. So I just wanted to break down that scene right there in regards to pointing out the direction, the intensity, and the color light. Because every time you put a light up, you're going to have to figure those four out. Whether you know you're doing it or not, you have to decide what you're going to do with the light. And those are the four things you're going to be deciding on. So the more you know about those and figure it out, the easier it is to just pop it up and roll. So I'm going to move on from this guy. Hope you guys got a little use out of that. What movie's that, huh? What movie's that? Y'all know.
Exorcist, of course.
Exorcist, yeah, the highest grossing R-rated film ever. Crazy, man. All right, so now we're gonna talk a little bit about motivation. Boom. Where's the light your source coming from? Where's the scene coming from? So in the last clip we just saw, it was coming from a spaceship out there. Bam. Coming from a spaceship. And there was also some light that was coming from a moonlight. So you can have more than one motivation for a light in the scene. Obviously, you have more lights in the scene. You're not just gonna have one motivation. So the motivation from this light over here could be the lamp, and it's gonna go shining this way. The motivation from this light up here could be the moonlight coming in from the windows, and it's coming this way. So what's the motivation for the light, and which light is going to be the key light or the biggest light on your set? So if you go back to here, obviously the red light is going to be the key light because it's the brightest light. It kind of overpowers the blue light because your eyes kind of go over to that area of the red. All right. But you still got the blue light there to kind of help out accent it a little bit, almost like a fill light. Okay. So first thing you decide, where do you want to put the light from? Okay. Oh, talk about that. Look, my light went out. Dude, I even changed the battery too before this because I'm like, you know what? This thing's going to go out. Pause for a second, fellas. This thing's going to go out. I need to change it, put a new battery in, but obviously it wasn't fully charged. Oh, my goodness.
So what's the motivation there with that scene? I don't remember it. Is it like, it looks too low? Is it like a house?
About my light that went out? How you have a lighting workshop and the guy can't even keep his lights on, huh? Are you talking about The Exorcist? You can't really see the whole image, but it's coming from a window from up there. This is the PowerPoint template, cut it off, but you can look at the poster in the Exorcist poster. All right, we're back up. Technical difficulties done.
You know that shot took 2 separate evenings to get, by the way.
Did it? Yeah. Do you have a little insight on that?
I've watched a lot of behind the scenes things, and they did an extensive behind the scenes for Exorcist. That movie was rife with production issues and problems, but yeah, that particular shot was a very specific shot they wanted, and it took 2 entire nights of shooting to get it.
Wow, and it paid off. Because that's that one shot that you associate with that entire movie, and everybody knows what it is. That's great. Yeah, every film is rife with production issues. It's crazy, even nowadays, man. So I watch some behind the scenes stuff too, and you see some of the crazy stuff that goes on. It doesn't make you feel so bad when your production feels like it's, the wheels are going to fall off. You're like, wait a minute, these guys got $200 million and they can't even get their act together. Okay, I don't feel so bad now. So it's funny. All right, light motivation. Where's the light in your scene coming from? Sunlight, moonlight, through the window. Okay, house lighting, maybe there's a lamp or a ceiling receptacle. Okay, maybe a tech device such as a computer, your cell phone, a tablet, all right, a TV that's nearby. That can be a light too. That can help light the scene for sure. And then is the light in the scene? So you get to decide you want to put the light in the scene, or is the light off camera? As like a practical would be a light that's in the scene. Okay, there's a lot of times I'll put a scene together and I don't see this part of the room over here. And so since I'm not looking at that part of the room, the audience has no idea what's over there to a certain extent. And so sometimes I'll put a window, like I can pretend there's a window here. So I can put a light here, I can put some stuff around it and shape it, and I can cast a light on the wall in the back or off to the side, and I can make it look like a window and fool the audience into thinking, hey, there's a window over here off camera. They don't know there's no window there. They don't even know. But you can do stuff like that when you're lighting off camera. Obviously, if you're going to see a window in there or you're going to pan over to that area of the room, then you can't do that. Okay, so there's certain things you can do and cheat and get away with when you do lighting and where the light is motivated from. All right, here are some examples, all from fun little films that I did. And I might need to minimize my thing so you can see that one. So the first one, top left, we got Luke and Kara. This is an action film I did with them. The motivation of the light is from the sun. It's coming from the back. I put the sun behind them. In fact, I actually used a reflector. The sun was kind of high and they were in the shade, but I used the bounce board to reflect light on the back of them. So it doesn't have a high contrast ratio, obviously, because it's outside and it's not an ambient light. But if you look along like the back of Kara, her hair and her jacket, it's definitely brighter than the front part here. And same thing with Luke. You can see how the light shines along the back of his shoulder and then it drops off around. It can make darker. If I wanted to crush the colors and darken it with contrast, I could, but that might look kind of weird. But regardless, you're outside. It's a good habit to use the sun as a backlight. You don't have to do it every single time, but that's where the motivation of the light is coming from. Boom, in that scene. The one on the top right here, this is one I did from Cheyenne for the Punisher. The motivation coming from a window. I actually had a light inside the room shining on him. It was a small LED, but then I left a little bit of this window curtain open so the audience would think that it's coming from this window, because obviously I couldn't get enough light from this window to light the scene. And then I have this small little lamp back here, and then I put a small LED on it just to illuminate him enough on the back of his head right there. Not too harsh because the light's not too bright. I didn't want to overpower it. I still wanted him to be dark because this was a dark scene. So I wanted him to be kind of thrown in darkness there. This comedy scene to the left here, I think we're going to take a look at that afterwards here. I got the motivational lights coming through the window. And I'll show you this scene in a second. It acts as the key light. It acts as like a fill. It acts as a rim light. It acts as a bunch of different lights because I have 3 characters in the scene and it's all moving around. And then down at the bottom, the motivation is from the window. I really enjoyed kind of shooting that one. I wanted to be very artsy with that scene because there's only a little bit of information that kind of goes out in that scene. And that's part of it too. Like, what's happening in the scene? Can you get artsy fartsy? Okay. Or do you actually have to see the characters and their expressions in their face? Or can they say a few things? It can be lit artistically and we can move on to the next scene. So you get your fill in of like, oh, I did something cool and fancy. And then you mix those with your regular shots that you're seeing. And all of a sudden you have a nice dynamic film that goes back and forth between traditional stuff. It's comprehensible to the audience. And then, ooh, you have these artsy fartsy shots that are in there. Because not every shot can be super artsy fartsy. I'm just going to say that right now. Okay. Next slide. So here we go. Let's watch this scene and then we just kind of go through it a little bit. So this was a comedy. All right, this is Madison. She comes in, she's having boy troubles, and it's the perfect boyfriend. It was a cute little comedy. It was shown at the OIF. Some of you guys might be familiar with it. And might have actually seen it. Maybe you laughed once or twice. If not, it's cool. It's not my fault. But I don't usually do comedies. And later on in the scene, I'll show you a picture. I have a picture of something that I did that I was lighting for this. And when I was literally on set lighting, I'm like, man, this looks like a horror scene. And I go, this is what you get when you get a horror cinematographer trying to light a comedy movie. It looks dramatic and overdone. Like, ugh. So it was a little interesting and frustrating because I just don't like turning the lights on and making everything blah like you do in comedies. But nonetheless, so checking this scene out. So obviously I have the light coming through the window. Okay. When I was choosing where I'm going to light the scene, like she has these great little blinds on her window. Like I love those things. I want to use those somehow. Okay. I might not be able to use the shapes leaning against the wall, but at least I can kind of close and open them and the light can come through there. So I put a 1K out there, bam, blasted it through the window. I pointed it mostly on the bookshelf in the back. Okay. So now this was my key light. The motivation of my light is the daylight coming through the side. Now I could have changed it and made it a little more orange or a little bit more blue if I wanted to get a little, more nighttime, but it was a daytime shot, middle of the day. Didn't want to get too crazy. So I decided to do white because she has these kind of tan orangish walls. So an orange white coming in would be kind of like, eh. So I left the white or the light more white. All right. So she comes in, and when she comes in, it's kind of her key light over here. So it acts as kind of like her key on her face over here. She's falls in that. And now it's her key too for this young girl here. So it's a nice little soft on the side of her. She's kind of well lit, but then she goes into a little bit of a contrast off to the side here. So it kind of falls off, which is good. And then of course you have some contrast in the back with a shadow from the bookshelves. Creates that and falls off. So it's not just all lit and flat. Okay, you have some bright areas and some darker areas. And that's kind of the key when you want to do cinematic lighting is kind of bright and dark, and mix those up. As we move on, she walks over. And now for this young gal, it's her rim light. So the key light that I have coming through the window is her rim light sitting in a chair right there. And so this is also an important part of filmmaking is blocking your actors. Where are you going to put them? Because obviously I had to put them in certain places in order to shoot this and make this light work for all of them. So don't discount the fact that you can just, come in. Don't discount the fact that you can't block and rehearse your actors where they need to be. Okay. So this is where you, if you want to be a director, have to work with your cinematographer. This is where you as a cinematographer have to work with your director and be like, hey, look, this is what I want to do. I need your actors to do this. Can we do this? Okay, so we wanted to put her in a chair. So we put her in a chair. So now she has a nice little rim light behind her. And I have a soft little LED or something here kind of lighting her. And you can kind of tell because there's a little bit of a shadow on the wall to her side here where the light's coming from. So nothing crazy, just enough to illuminate her and see her. But she still has a nice kind of a hard rim light behind her, which looks good. And then as we move forward, of course, Madison gets in the middle. Boom, key light right in her face. She kind of steps into the light. It's one of those things where I had to tell Madison to make sure you don't create a shadow on her face when you're moving. And she kind of does right there. And when they argue a little bit. And then here, bam, the light hits the DVDs in the bookshelf. Okay, it's glowing on her hair a little bit here too. She's a little bit darker, not a huge big deal because she's not the center of attention. You got a lighter spot here between them, darker, lighter, darker. So now you have those contrast areas. And then as she continues talking, boom, her hair kind of covers the light. So we talk like, hey, throw your hair off to the side like that so the light can hit your hair. Let it shine, let it be golden, okay? It hits her face just a little bit, but I was gonna live with that, it's fine. I was willing to live with that considering all the other cool elements that this light provided. So that's one thing I want to tell you guys, like when you light a scene, I like lighting from the windows because you can be kind of creative like that, as opposed to just putting lights inside the room and turning them on and everything gets flat. And you're kind of struggling to take shadows off the walls that it's hitting their face and you see the person and you're just like, oh. Sometimes just light from the windows and from outside the room in order to create what we're trying to go for, that dramatic effect. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, throw them down and then we'll hit them up later. This scene from It Whispers, same thing. I had no lights inside this room. All the lights are from the outside. Boom. Talking. Who operates in a kitchen with no lights? Nobody does. It's ridiculous, right? Okay. But in order to make a horror movie, you do in a horror movie, but in real life, nobody walks into a kitchen and cooks breakfast with no lights on. I have one light off to the side here. It's a practical, but it's barely off to the side, so whatever. So what I did is I got an LED panel out there in the window. I hit the back wall here with it. It's kind of a motivation for this, but it creates a nice little rim light for him. And I have a 1K at the window, which gets a little bright at times, but I was willing to live with it, considering what I was getting from it. It also gets kind of like a fill on him, and the blinds create these stripes here. We're going to talk about that a little later with cinematic effect and adding elements to your scene, okay, to kind of mix it up a little bit. All right, so he's in there. He's still in darkness. They're kind of dark. This is a little bright. Sure, kick me a little bit, but I love how it bleeds off and it exposes him really nice, exposes a lot of this table, and then it bleeds off. I just love how it bleeds into the scene right here. And I love really how it hits her. Bam, this is great. So you have this bright area, dark contrast, a little bit of brightness right here, dark. She's dark, and now some of the light from these cabinets and the wind and the refrigerator is coming from the other one. So the other light is brightening these areas up. So you don't just have a big dark area, big light area. It kind of alternates between. Okay, and I love how it falls off on her face just a little bit right here. Okay, this is a horror movie. All right. And she's pouring the orange juice, yada, yada, yada. And then boom, when he turns around, I love how it's right behind him. I'm a sucker for the backlight and the rim light, man. And I love how it's bright on him and then his face is kind of dark, kind of falls off. But it's dark, but then you have this brighter area here. So then you have dark, bright, dark, bright. Now you're creating those different areas of contrast in your scene. All right. And then they talk, and then I love this wide shot here too. Now this light out here is kind of like almost her key-ish. It's highlighting the front of her face. It's him and his rim back there, but then she opens the fridge, and then now she's got, this lovely little hairline light right there. Bam, love it. And then this light, it actually did a lot more than I thought it would, to be honest with you. And it worked. I was like, all right, we're going to roll with it. And then when she turns and does this, I'm like, oh, that's great. Look at that. Boom, backlight. This gives her a little bit of a fill right there. She delivers a line. I love how it's dark. We're going to talk about that a little later too, shooting into the shadows of their face, okay, as opposed to just shooting to the brighter side of their face, keeping them a little underexposed, create that dramatic element of your film. I love how bright that is there. I love how this is soft and it just kind of highlights her a little bit on the front, but yet she's still kind of dark. Again, it's a horror movie, guys. All right. So if it was a comedy, totally different, you know, or if it was a thriller or maybe a gangster movie, you might just put lights from the top and all shine them down and make it look ugly. Bam. Anyways, so that was that scene. I really enjoyed lighting that. I just love thinking outside the box, and I really like lighting from the windows, lighting from outside the scene. Okay, so think about that next time you guys do a scene. How can I light from outside the scene rather than just put a light up right in the middle of the kitchen and turn the light on? Like how easy it would have been to just put a light behind their heads, shine it on their faces, and then boom, they're exposed. It would have been easy. It would have been fine, but I don't think it would have been very cinematic. So light from outside in. Aha. All right, so now let's get to our how to light cinematically. Okay, so these are the elements that we're going to talk about for cinematic lighting. The backlight, shoot into the shadows, which I kind of talked about a little bit of these already. Layering your lights, adding color contrast, and then creating texture. Okay, now you're not going to be able to do all these every single time, but if you can at least go down the checklist and say, how can I do this? How can I do that? Can I do this? Can I do that? Then you're at least making an effort to push your scene to be a little bit more cinematic. Okay, brought to you by the world's greatest architect that destroys ancient temples every time he enters. Gotta love Indiana Jones, man. Spielberg does some great stuff. He has great characters, man. He has great characters that people can relate to and jump in. All those movies. Started with Jaws back in the day. All right, we can talk about the backlight. Okay, also known as the rim light, the kicker, the hairline light. Me personally, I absolutely love the backlight. It's like my favorite of all the lights. Okay, it's so emotional. It can be so beautiful, so dramatic. It's just tears me up just thinking about it. I love the backlight. Anytime I can get a beautiful backlight in there to just shine bright and either kick a lens flare or hit somebody in the back of the head, hit those actors in the back of the head, I will do it. All right. So the backlight shapes and outlines your subject. It separates your subject from the background, creating depth. So that also continues to help with the cinematic element of your film. Okay, creating that depth that you're going for. All right, so some examples from some fun stuff that I did. Top left here, we have a film called On Your Street. And this was probably my favorite shot from the film, and it literally lasted like 2 seconds. But we have a young Ashlyn Jaden there in the chair. And we were just peeking in this room for just like a half a second. I'm like, oh, dude, I'm gonna light this so good. And so I put this little lamp here and I creeped it over just a little bit so you can see the fill on the side of her face right there. Okay, so that's kind of her key light. And I got this nice little rim light just boom, hitting her in the back of the head, you know, coming from somewhere in the room. You don't know. Could be a top receptacle, could be some lamp or something. You don't know, but it looks good. And she's sitting there and she's crying because this is a very emotional moment of stuff that's going on. It's a human trafficking film, so we'll just leave it at that. But I wanted to create it very dramatic because they see her, these girls are walking through the house and they see her, and it's a very intense moment. And so I wanted to light it in an intense way that was very dramatic. So I love just lighting that. It actually took me a while to light that just for the fact that it was only like a 2 or 3 second clip in the film. Oh, and if you want to go to some of my fan films, sure, why not? This was, oh boy, Harley Quinn-ish, and so she's got this bright backlight, which I love putting this on there. And that's kind of the thing I enjoy some of these horror fan films is you can kind of go outside the box a little bit. They're almost like comic books in the way that you can light them a little more extravagantly. Okay, you can use brighter lights. You can shine stuff for here for no reason, you know. So I have a little smoke in the background, which is some of those elements that we'll talk about later that you can add texture to your scene. I have another light over here, just kind of highlighting him a little bit to bring him up. So we're creating some layers here. All right, and then there's that backlight that's hitting her, but it's also hitting him right here too. You can see how it highlights around his face, which separates him from this dark area in the middle. So you have kind of a light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. And that's what you want, that back and forth play in between your scene. You don't just want all bright, okay? And guess what, fellas? You don't have to be just for the face or the head or a character. You can do it for hands too. And that's the only reason I put this in here is to show you that, you know, they wanted the close up on the hands shaking, and boom, put a backlight on the hands. They pop out from the scene. Okay. And it just kind of shows you how you can use it for more than just the character. And then we obviously have, this is from It Whispers down here in the bottom right, Miss Danielle. She was walking down and she turned around, and this backlight on the top of her head is to emulate like a light receptacle that's in the top of the hallway. And the one in the hallway didn't really do it that well, but so I added one in there. But I love that backlight, that kicker, that rim light. All right, so that was your rim light. Now we're going to talk about shooting into the shadows. Okay, this is something that I kind of did a little bit, didn't really realize I was doing, and then you research some more and like, oh gosh, I did some of that stuff. And sometimes you just do stuff you don't know why, but it looks kind of good, and you realize, oh, that's kind of how you were supposed to do some things. And that's why I did it, because it looked good. So shooting into the shadows of the character's face. Okay, you capture your subject from the side in which the shadow is cast opposite of the lit side, okay, of their face, opposite of the lit side of their face. This creates dramatic contrast on your subject. I think the best example of this, if you look through the evolution of like the Harry Potter series, the first couple were, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but I've seen some of them. And the first couple were, you know, just a little bit more lighter hearted, fun. And then once you got in the last couple episodes, everything was dark, and it just seemed so very emotional. Okay, and they just started lighting it differently, and that was kind of a trend in a lot of stuff, you know, late 2000, 2010, and then beyond. Things started just getting a little darker. They had like a darker feel to stuff, and it wasn't anything majorly dramatic, but this has, you know, a lot to do with that. Oh, I put stop lighting from the front. Stop lighting from the front. All right. And so here's some of your light. Shoot from the shadows. Shoot into the shadows. Okay. So I got a scene here. Austin, he's sitting at a table. The biggest thing I'm getting at is the dark part of their face that's lit is towards the camera. Okay, so he's got a little rim light with blue. He's got a lamp that's creating some yellow, but it's shadowy right here. You can even do it for comedy. So on the picture to the top right here, we have TL. This is a comedy. This is the Galactic Lineage, that sci-fi one that we saw that red and blue scene from. So this is more of a comedic scene. Everything was kind of well lit. It wasn't very dramatic, but even then, you can still shoot it in a way where there's a little bit of contrast, you know, and it's not just all flat and lit. So shooting from the opposite side of the lit side of their face. The key light is over here on his right side, but I put the camera on this side, and now he's looking camera left. Okay, and now I'm seeing the darker side of his face, okay, which I see more of a darker side. Then of course it's highlighted by a little bit of a rim light behind him in order to kind of separate him a little bit from the background. Again, it was kind of a comedy. I didn't want to get too extreme, but I just wanted to have something there to kind of kiss it a little bit and have it good. But nonetheless, this is the perfect example of shooting them on the dark side of their face. Okay, you can still see it. It still is effective. The light falls off kind of nicely. It's not too hard. Okay. But yet you still have that contrast there, which gives a little bit of an edge to it. And then I have some examples here. This is the same kitchen scene where the background was kind of lit, and we have a hairline light on the back of Danielle, and her face is totally almost in the shadows. Again, horror film. She peeks over her shoulder, and it's got a little bit of a fill in here, but I put nothing in the front. Like, I just wanted to let it ride and let her be kind of dark. And as long as it wasn't too underexposed, I wanted to be in the dark. It was a horror film. That's the way I was going. And then I just pulled this from a scene from a film I did years ago. And I'm like, oh, look at that. And the light's coming from behind him. It's from a window. And then you're just shooting into his face and into the dark side of his face. Okay. Sometimes there's no point. You don't need to put a light on their face and their eyes every single time. All right. Let the shadows be what they're going to be. And as long as it's not underexposed, you can still see their eyes, you know, and it works. Let it roll. All right. So that's shooting into the shadows. All right. Shooting into the shadows. All right, another cinematic element, layer in your lights. This can give it tricky, and this is the one where you might not have the chance to do it all the time, okay? But this is what you want to do, is create highlights and shadows that contrast each other. So we talked a little bit about that on a two-dimensional flat plane, okay? As we look left and right across the scene. Now, you know, this talks about doing it on a three-dimensional plane from forward to back, how you light stuff in the front and the back, okay? It helps create depth in cinematic lighting. So this one, you might not always get a chance to it because it requires smaller little lights to place here and there around your scene in order to get that effect. So this is the comedy I was talking about, and I was like, man, I'm lighting like a horror film. But anyway, it was a dramatic moment at the end, so we'll roll with it. We have our lights kind of right here on the plane. I had a little something towards the front, but then you also have this lamp in the back, and then way in the back you have the window there, letting some light in. Not a whole lot, but just enough to kind of illuminate some of those kitchen areas and stuff like that. So not overly crazy in that regard, but sometimes this is the one that's the trickiest because you don't always have time to do stuff like this when you're on a production. Okay, and you're always running and gunning. You don't always have time to light every single layer. Okay, but It Whispers, here's a good one. They're playing a game, and I have a light right here on the board game. In fact, this is actually the light that's kicking her in the back of the head and creating a rim light. It's also hitting the board up here. So you got this layer you have behind her head, and then you also have the light that illuminates. It's a lamp behind her because you see it in the wider shot. It hits the wall, and then it also creates these banisters, which creates a little effect of a bleed off over there. Okay, so you kind of layered it down the line there. This was a silly little scene that I overshot for a fan film. Orange and blue. I have a really bright key light in the back, but as you can see, it's brighter here on her front, bam. And then as we fall back, the computer's lit a little bit, then it goes dark. And then we have him. We have the back of this guy behind him. Okay, lit. So that's another layer right there that it's lighting. So it just kind of steps back one or two. It doesn't always have to go back too far. But a lot of times when you put something in the front, I probably could have put a light to highlight the edge of this computer screen in front of me if I had time, you know, to add another little layer right here in the front. But hey, you can't always do what you want to do. And sometimes you have to press the red button and you got to go. We saw this one already with the backlight, but you have the layer up front here, white right here in the front, gets a little dark, falls off. Then you see the dark area way in the back, and you have her, she's in the middle layer. And then behind her, you have her computer, which is back there, adding a little bit, but then it kind of falls off over here. So you have the light in the background. You can see it being hit with a little bit of smoke, a little haze there to kind of create some elements for it as well too. So that's kind of just lighting and layers. Now, this is probably the trickiest one for me to pull some clips from, to be honest with you guys, because I don't think about doing this all the time. But nonetheless, it's something to think about, and it's not something you have a ton of time to do when you're doing stuff really quick, running and gunning. But it helps out when you have small little practical lights or little LED lights you can place variously out throughout the scene to kind of highlight certain parts here and there. All right. Color contrast. Here we go. So putting some color contrast in your film. This is another one where you don't always have to do it. And you can always add a lot of color in post-production as well too, okay? But that's more of like color grading for the whole scene. But if you want to change the colors on set, or if you want to change colors in areas of your scene, that's something you have to do on set. That's something you have to plan ahead for, okay? So you want to use complementary colors to accent your scene. Okay, those are located opposite each other on the color wheel. So obviously the biggest ones you guys are going to see are orange and blue, okay? Christmas colors, red and green. You combine one warm and one cool color to produce a high vibrant, high contrast effect. You guys see this in movies all the time. I'm not going to have to harp on it too hard, but here's a couple examples of some extreme stuff that I've done. I don't always do this, and sometimes if I do it, it's sometimes subtle. But top left, fan film, red and blue. Red and blue don't totally contrast with each other, but red was the color of the theme and the logo and stuff. So red hit him in the back. Blue decided to make this holographic screen blue. So now you have red and blue. Boom, cut the screen in half. This is the same clip from that On Your Street human trafficking. I was thought, what can I do about this one to make it interesting? Literally, that was the only shot of the scene, was just this one of the two of them in the bed. They were leaned against the bed. So I'm like, oh, well, you're kind of pointing me in a wall here. We're going to have some shadows for sure, but whatever. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll do an orange light right here. And then I put a light over here. They don't know what's over here. So I have a window off to the side. And so it's blue light coming in. Hey, it's nighttime. So total contrast right there, blue and white. Freddy, one of the fan film I did, orange and green aren't exactly the opposite each other on the color wheel, but this is one of those instances where you can get a little creative, a little yellowish and some green to create some color there. And then how many times have you seen Transformers? This is the exact look from the Transformers, that nice orange touch with that blue hard light. Boom. That's what Michael Bay did for all of his Transformers stuff. You light the darks a little more blue and the midtones a little more orange, and you kind of throw that out there, and that's that. It's a fun color, man. You see that on posters all the time. Blue and orange is huge. So if you get a chance to incorporate it, go for it. A lot of times people use nighttime as blue, which if you go outside, nighttime is rarely ever blue. It's usually kind of a whitish color. But nonetheless, people kind of emulate the blue light with nighttime, and both work, you know. But it's a good way to add a blue, and then you can contrast it with some orange, whether it be an inside lamp or a light inside, in order to create that nice little contrast. color contrast. Okay, and finally, we're going to go ahead and add some texture to our scene. And again, this is one you can't always do. You won't always be able to do. Okay, but at least if it thought crosses your mind, then that's a good thing, right? Okay, this gives your image depth. Okay, and sometimes it can be in the form of practical lights too. It doesn't always have to be smoke, fog, lens flares, or rain. Okay, sometimes practical lights will work. Even lighting shapes and shadows, such as like Venetian blinds or cucaloras or a little cookie that you put to create a shadow on a wall or something back there. That also helps create texture, kind of break up a flat wall. Okay, so creating texture. All right, so we have a couple of scenes here. For It Whispers, we shot with the sun going down. And I was like, oh, that would be cool. What would be cooler? So we had some haze going with that sun went down. So thanks to Dale Metz, I give him a shout out. He found this really cool bug. It was a bug mosquito repellent in the thing that it heats up. You put a propane tank in the back and you pour it with bug repellent. And it's a smoker. It smokes out the mosquitoes. But if you use mineral spirits instead of bug repellent, then it's okay for people to inhale it a little bit. And it's outside and it just covers this large area. There's a video on YouTube and he turned me on to that. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna get one of those things. And it's the greatest thing ever because it smokes up a large area. You don't have to have an outlet for it like you do like a regular smoker. And that's what we did for this. And the wind was kind of blowing a little bit. So we had to hurry up and smoke, jump off to the side. And it creates those wonderful rays that you see like that. So that's adding a little bit of haze just to kind of make your film scene pop a little bit. Sure, could you add a little smoke in post-production? Yeah, but people can tell when you do that. Here's an example of like those blinds, cutting up this scene here to add some texture to it. Across the cabinets, across him. Is it the right thing? I don't know. Does it look a little off? Sure, but hey, it's there. And then also a little bit on the cabinet from the light from back there. And then this was a fake lens flare that I put in, but just to throw a lens flare in there. This was a really cool shot of Kara. I actually did like a gimbal in and then the gimbal back out and followed her. And this was just a little frame from that when she was walking towards camera. And this scene here was really cool. And we're going to talk about adding elements to it here. So when I say you can add light to it, like this here is a fluorescent light and it fell and it was hanging there. Okay, so that sometimes too, I'm going to show you a clip right after this to show you some of these, how you can have these elements and lights in there to actually play in your scene, excuse me. And of course the backlight, and we had there's a little effect on there, like a speed blur or something to make it light, but this is the hero shot where he comes in, saves the day, and kills all the bad guys. You know the film. You know the film. Frank Castle. Okay, so here's a scene of a shot, and this is kind of like one of the last two things that I got before we'll wrap this up here, in case you guys are wondering. This is a scene where I really like this scene because the character interacts with the light. Okay, and it's just thinking outside the box. I was really proud of myself, pat myself on the back. I did this a couple years ago with a film called Inhabited. It was a dark sci-fi kind of a thriller, and as you can tell from the music. So there's my light. Boom, she hits it. There's my, and then he grabs it. It's obviously hanging from the ceiling because it's broken. A little blood and gore there. And then it giving me a lens flare too. And now I cut this scene up just a little bit. And now it's her rim light. Okay, it's her rim light. As we get behind her, boom, we turn around. It still gives him a little bit of love right there, and we showcase the light on her. So I'm gonna back up just a little bit because I kind of went through kind of quick. So they walk in, got a little top light from here, just kind of shining on nothing fancy. But then I got this this light hanging in the shot here as a fluorescent. She walks by, taps it, now it moves, boom, it lights up our character. Sure, he gets a little overexposed, but then he grabs it, boom, and now he's using it. He can control it. Okay, we see our bad guy there with the head got shot. And then now, yeah, you're a little hot right here. This is hot for sure. But dude, I'm living with it because the light's in the scene and it's interacting with the characters. I got a little lens flare there. And now we have her kind of come in and she covers it up a little bit, but it's okay because it kind of silhouettes her a little bit. And then we can go to her coverage as they're talking. It gets a nice, it's a soft fluorescent light, so it gets a nice little spill on her. And of course, when I get behind her, I love this shot here where it's kind of her rim light or kicker, even though it's from the front of her face. We're behind her, and now it's highlighting the gun as she pulls it up, right? And then her hairline as well too, and you can see him interacting right there as well too, because they're looking for someone that's in the room. And bam, it goes on. So I really like doing that. I had that light. I'm like, why light it from the top? It could have been top lit and could have been just fine, but it's a way where you can add texture to your scene, and you use the light to be actually in the scene, which adds texture to it because the light moves around and actually interacts and changes. I've done that with a couple things. I did that with a fan film where the guys were fighting around the light. It was kind of silly, but whatever. It's something different. So after you do a couple scenes and you start filming stuff more, you're like, what can I do that's different? What can I do that's different? You start jumping outside the box a little bit once you get kind of comfortable. Okay. And skip past this one. Bam. So that was it. There we go. All right. So that kind of wraps it up. Let me see. Yep. Questions. So how to light cinematically. We talked about loving the backlight, baby. Love that backlight. Okay. Shoot into the shadows, which means you have to move to the dark side. All right. Make sure you shoot into the shadows. Layering your lights to create depth. I couldn't think of anything funny for that, so I just made that. Color contrast enhances your mood. Okay, so think about colors and how they change your mood. All right. And then texture makes your scene come alive. You saw the one where the guy was interacting with the light. But then also you can have water stuff. I've done water elements before too. That gets a little tricky, so you have to be very sparingly on how you use it, or you just use it very conservatively in a scene where you have more control over it. Smoke is a great way to do that. And I talked to you about a quick, easy way to use like a bug smoker in order to use that for fog for your scene. You can take it anywhere. All right, just don't set nothing on fire. And that stuff helps add texture and contrast to your scene as well too. So get creative with your camera angles. That's the only other thing I'll say too, is get creative with your camera angles. Once you kind of incorporate all this stuff, don't just do a normal locked off shot right here, okay? Go down a little bit, maybe a little low shot, and then maybe Dutch angle a little bit, okay? All right, maybe be a little high shot and then Dutch a little bit, turn off to the side. All right, so now that you can get creative with this kind of stuff, you got to think about the composition and all the other elements of the camera as well too, because that also plays into it. But again, once you shoot more stuff, once you get more comfortable, you're going to be like, hey, all right, I've done this before, over the shoulder shot, yawn. How can we make this a little more fancy? Okay, so it just comes with practice, practice, practice. That's all it does. All right, so the more you get out there, the more you play, the more you'll rock and roll.